Good day and welcome to our Answers Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, we'll start off with some general market news and end with a tech/AI segment at the end. Market news or general news this week is going to be US inflation and retail sales, the signing of the NHI bill by President Ramaphosa, and in our tech segment, we'll cover both OpenAI and Google's announcements so far this week. So let's start off with the US inflation and retail sales numbers. The US inflation number came in at 3.4%, down from 3.5%. The 3.5% in the last period was actually an increase from the previous period, and that had been a bit of a surprise in the market. We came down 3.4, which is obviously slightly lower than 3.5. Virtually across the board, everything was as expected, slightly lower than the last period. But we also had retail sales come out as well at the same time. Retail sales were significantly worse than had been anticipated. We saw shrinkages when they expected a slight increase, especially when you look at the numbers ex autos and gasoline, which is petrol sales. We saw a market decrease in terms of sales, possibly showing that the US consumer is under pressure, showing weakness in the economy. Some people also attribute it to the fact that we are seeing the resumption of student loans in the US. The US has quite a large number of people that have gone to college on government-backed student loans and other student loans, and for a long time now, we've been talking multiple years, pretty much the entire Biden presidency, repayments of those loans have been delayed. A bunch of forgiveness has been going through as well. So people are not paying those loans because they think, why do I pay a loan that might be forgiven in entirety? And that's been Biden's one of President Biden's key policies, is forgiving student loans. Now, if that's being resumed, then obviously people have less disposable income. The money is going to government, and therefore have less money to spend, out shopping, etc. This number was taken in conjunction with the inflation number to be reasonably positive. Slightly falling inflation, weaker economy, bigger chance of a rate cut. We saw the 10-year yield fall a little bit on this news. We saw markets rise a little bit on the news as well. Look, I don't think it's changing fundamentally what's happening with regards to rate cuts for the rest of the year, but I do think in terms of what we were could have been the worst case scenario, this was definitely better than expected. So it's not a defining number, but it is, if you had to say, is number more good or bad, it's definitely more good. The other thing that happened this week was the signing of the NHI bill by the President Ramaphosa. Now, what the NHI bill aims to do is, on the surface, laudable, which is basically have a more rational distribution of healthcare services in South Africa. Right now, what we have is two systems, slightly higher funded in some measures in the private sector than the public sector, but the public sector serves many, many times more people than the private sector does. So we have, roughly the same amount of money in two groups. One group is like 9 times larger than the other. And obviously that service quality for the group that's larger is going to be lower. If you were to take more money from the wealthier group and put it to the poorer group, you would be able to, attack diseases, attack illnesses that, maybe, have a bigger benefit. Instead of spending, hundreds of thousands on one procedure on one person, you spend tens of thousands on many procedures on many people, and that might have a bigger impact. The problem with this is that how do you fund this? I've seen a study out there, I've seen a breakdown that mentions the fact that, South Africa and the UK have roughly the same, population size. If we spent as much on the National Health Insurance as they do on the National Health Service, NHS in the UK, NHI in South Africa, we would have to pretty much double the budget in South Africa to get the money to spend that. Doubling taxes, doubling all government receipts. Remember the highest tax rate in South Africa is 45%. You can't double that. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Imagine doubling VAT, up to 30%. That's not going to work out. So it's not going to be a viable, I think, financial thing to do in order to get the kind of services they get in the UK for the population in general. And let me tell you, having lived in the UK, private healthcare in South Africa is actually better than the NHS in the UK. If you had to have a procedure in the NHS and visit a doctor, have treatment for anything more complicated than some simple stuff, you'd be better off having a medical in South Africa and using private healthcare in South Africa. The ability to see a doctor is quicker, the service you get is better, ability to get medicines, etc. is better. You are paying for it, but the service is, and what you're getting is better as well. So we would be talking about getting a service that is worse than private healthcare in South Africa, but would cost basically double the budget of the country of South Africa. That's not feasible. So the only way this would work is to significantly reduce the quality of work of service that you get in the private for people that currently have private healthcare. You'd probably have to do something as well about payments to doctors, because you probably would have to have some kind of reduction in doctors' payments. You might have to have some kind of control over where doctors are allowed to operate, which patients they take on, how many patients they take on, etc. Those kind of things, I think, are very negative for the sector in South Africa, the healthcare sector in South Africa. We would likely see doctors leave. We would likely see people, try to find a way around this here. Like I said, overall negative in terms of the outlook for South Africa if the NHI goes through. That being said, like I said, the actual underlying reasons for it, totally laudable, totally understandable why you'd want to basically have a more even distribution of spending on healthcare. And you can't deny that it would, for the majority of people in South Africa, would improve their healthcare, but it would come at a significant, drop in quality for the smaller group that currently does pay private sector, costs. And then it comes to the big part of this particular, week. We're going to talk about OpenAI, then we're going to talk about Google's presentations. Firstly, let me just say, it's pretty obvious Google has no cool. It's not a cool company. Just watch the DJ they had playing at the Google event. It was very weird, and just the way they did things in Google just sounded more corporate-y, sounded more canned. But OpenAI had a more open presentation. But let's look at the fundamentals of what was offered by both sides. On OpenAI side, what they're pretty much coming out with now is a multimodal model that you can interface with via voice and via vision, which is basically the camera, and the screen as well. So we can actually see what's on your screen, or we can see using your camera. You can hear you talk, and it can talk back to you. And from what the demo looked like in real time, what I mean by that is it's not like you say something, you wait 5 seconds, and it responds to you in 5 seconds. No, you say something, and it kind of responds to you in the same kind of speed you'd expect somebody in a phone call to respond to you. A fraction of a second delay, that kind of stuff. And yes, people have pointed out that some things about the way it talks maybe gives it more than a fraction of a second to talk back. But it says, you asked a question. It says, "How would I do this?" And I go, "Wow, that's a very interesting question." That little part took more than a second to say, but it gives it more time to give you the next part of it. That's a very interesting question. Here is the answer. So there is that kind of trickery used in the background to kind of make it seem more real time than it actually is. But humans are comfortable with that. You talk to somebody and you ask them a question, and they say, "Well, that's interesting. Let me just get back. Let me just let me think about it for a second. Or this is an interesting question," and then answer it. That's pretty much how we communicate. We are not uncomfortable with that. We don't basically feel weird for some reason. If you ask a question and it just goes silent for 2 seconds and then answers it to you, that feels a bit more weird than basically going, "Oh, that's an incredibly interesting question. I'm glad you asked it," and then answering that question. It's the same effective thing, but it somehow makes it more comfortable. But anyway, the actual model that has demonstrated a couple of things. Firstly, he's demonstrated real-time translation, Spanish and English, I believe it was, and as well as Italian and English. Very, very competent from what I can gather. Very, very clear. So we effectively being saying, you say to them, your phone, "I'm about to have a conversation with this person, and he speaks Japanese and I speak English. When I say something in English, repeat it in Japanese. When he said it in Japanese, repeat it in English." That is the kind of prompt you would use, and it seems to work very well, like I said. The other thing they demonstrated was tutoring. So they had Salman Khan, the guy that runs Khan Academy. For those that have kids, you probably know what Khan Academy is. And he had to basically tutor his kid about some geometry, trigonometry rather. I think it was sine operation. Very simple stuff. But obviously, you can imagine a trick tutor for your kids. That's added value immediately there, and it seemed to be very good at it. It seemed to really be understanding what was happening. The way that particular program worked was it read your computer screen, So you could see the document you were dealing with. It could see you basically making marks on the document on the screen. It couldn't see you, but that's what working like that. Then there was a demonstration where they did allow vision to be used. I see the two demonstrations allow vision. In one demonstration, basically they asked it questions about what it saw, etc. And the second demonstration, what they did was they asked it to talk to another AI. One AI could see, the other AI wasn't allowed to see, and they basically went back and forth asking questions about the environment, etc. And then they ended up, strangely enough, asking them to sing a song about the experience, which, was very, very bad, awkward, but, it was definitely, as good as the average person could do. I don't see anything particularly bad about that. And can you imagine having a thing in your pocket that you can talk to, that can explain, things that you show it, either on the screen or using your camera. You can ask it questions and responds in what feels like real time for a human being. That I think is a killer application. That is an incredible application. Google comes out the day after, I believe, 2 days after, and does another demonstration on their particular, AI stuff. And to say the least, it was not anywhere near as impressive as OpenAI. In fact, the way the people were talking about OpenAI immediately after it occurred was kind of saying, yeah, it's nice, interesting, but they won't be blown away by it. But after the Google presentation, people are going back and saying, oh my God, OpenAI was incredible, because in comparison, Google looked just so bad. For some reason, Google keeps on believing that we want AI to plan our vacations. And there were a lot of examples about how, I want to go here, give me an itinerary about what to do. I want to go to dinner, find me places to go to dinner. Really, would you ever use that? If you want to go out, you want your phone to tell you where to go. You want to go on holiday, you want your phone to basically plan your holiday for you. Maybe plan how to get there, but not plan what you want to do when you're there. That obviously is quite silly. There were some interesting things about organization. For instance, there's one particular part where they showed an example of a person's asking the AI to go through their email and get all the receipts for their particular business and create a spreadsheet of flows. That's very interesting. If you can go through just a general email kind of, and look at it and basically pick out what's the invoices and kind of build a budget for either your personal life or for a business. That's very interesting. That's very good. There were things around photos and recognition and video that's very interesting as well. And they were very, very short. I've been talking about one question snippets from the DeepMind, where they asked it questions about I think one was, what is this? It was pointing at a subwoofer, or no, a tweeter on a speaker. And the other one was, looking at a screen and asking questions about a program. And another one was basically drawing a database chart on kind of like a whiteboard and asking questions about it. All these things I think were, reasonably good. And, the answers were very good as well. I mean, especially if you look at the difference between answering what's a tweeter and then basically, solving a complex programming problem, or reasonably complex programming problem. That being said, they were all very short snippets. Whereas OpenAI had people sit down for minutes and just work with it, and it was real time. It was pretty obvious there was no editing in any particular segment. Which I think gives more credibility, especially considering Google's history of kind of doctoring some of these videos. So right now in the LLM space, Google is definitely behind OpenAI. But here's the thing. What exactly is the business of OpenAI? What do LLMs do? I mean, what is this thing going to make money off? Is this the $20 a month thing? Because quite frankly, OpenAI just came out and said that the previous thing that you were paying $20 a month is now available for free, and then you'll get a slightly better thing for paying $20 a month. So the $20 a month just gives you access to stuff 6 months earlier. That's what it is. That does not sound like $100 billion a year business. Think about it. Let's just say half the people in the world get this $20 package. Okay. Then you're talking about, $100 billion a year, maybe $100 billion a month, sorry, or like $1 trillion a year. Like I said, so it's not $1 trillion business, rather. I would say from that $20 a month. So we're talking about a system that $20 a month, half the people in the world, that gives you like $1 trillion in terms of business in a year. Now compare that to what Google launched last week, which is Alpha Fold 3. That thing allows you to develop drugs at probably a fraction of the current rate in terms of time required. So you'd be much more capable of building much more drugs. Look at the size of the healthcare industry. Very easily can foresee $1 trillion business from Google, where it becomes one of the dominant or partners in terms of drug manufacturing in the world. They already have agreements with a couple of drug companies. In fact, we've added those companies to our AI portfolio if you're interested in looking at those. So Google is not cool. Google does not seem to be able to match the coolness, especially on the LLM side. And I doubt that's because of capabilities. I think that's more to do with the structure Google has in terms of, corporate cowardice about certain things. But the actual thing that they're creating, that's probably going to be very valuable in the future. I would say I would rank basically AlphaFold in that thing. I would look at things like GNOME, which is the materials thing that they have, and a couple other products that they have, which are not in the LLM space. They are in the machine learning AI space, but they're not in the LLM space. And those things, I think, probably will have longer-term value, especially like you look at from here. They seem to have better long-term, valuations, or not better, but at least more concrete long-term valuations than I think the LLMs have. Because, firstly, all you're getting right now for having the OpenAI LLM is probably a 6-month period where you have stuff that the guy that's basically not paying for stuff doesn't have it. And even if they decide to take that away, in 6 months, basically Google and definitely, Meta, Facebook, is probably going to have similar to that out. And Meta, Facebook is definitely going open source. Oh, by the way, just to understand, the pattern these guys follow always, it seems to be when you're leading, you close it, a tool is behind you, open source. And so if you look at AlphaFold 3, that is a closed thing. That is not something that's available to the general public for free. You can use it as a research, etc. for free, but you can't commercialize it. You want to make the drugs, Google gets its cut. And I think, in terms of what LLMs look like right now, the free models seem to be very strong, very powerful. Not quite at the cutting edge, but we're not talking about years behind. We're talking 6 months behind, around about there. And in that scenario, I do think that the valuations from these LLMs in terms of what you can actually make as profits as a company probably is lower than you would think. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Cheers.